Hey guys, SmartBag87 here, and today we're going to be talking about Linux, and of course, Linux gaming. So, what is the difference between Windows and Linux? Well, has only one OS, and it has one pretty much centralized thing, and that is Windows 10. It's closed source, which means you can't modify the code or do anything as that such. It uses the NTFS partition, which of course tends to do like memory like defragmentation and all that other stuff, has high idle RAM usage, which means that there's a lot of stuff running in the background when you have nothing open on Windows. Like you got Windows Defender, you got your drivers and their telemetry. It's the most popular OS, uh, meaning that well most of the world actually uses Windows. I think like 80% uses. Games always work on it. Like any game will work on Windows pretty much. Well, it depends if it's an older game. It might work on lower Windows, or you might have to fire up a virtual machine or use an emulator. Most devices and hardware are supported. That actually should say all devices and hardware. So you got a new like a new mix amp, or you got a new like new headphones, like Surface ones. They'll work just fine. Has high system requirements, especially for the later versions of Windows. Those that has some high system requirements that you have to use or have to have for your device. But there is still 32-bit support for Windows, I think. Yeah, there is. There's definitely 32-bit support for Windows. That's your processor. Like most PCs have 64-bit processors. Linux. Now, Linux has many different flavors or distros. We'll actually be talking about that in a few slides. All open source, which means you can easily modify the code yourself and do other things. Can use any type of partition like ZFS. I'm not really sure if you can actually use ZFS, which I know you can, but I don't know the default partition for Linux. Least popular OS. It's one that game devs don't really like. Most game devs don't really care about it because of how low market share Linux is. But we'll get into Windows like game support and like using compatibility layers. Good hardware support, which pretty much it supports most of your older hardware and can be run on any hardware. Pretty much it. Well, those two should be probably be one, but you get the point. So, yeah, Windows Linux, you can basically get a distribution that is very low on system requirements, and you can have it run on toasters. On the most potato computers, you can have Linux run pretty well on those. Right, next slide. Why should you use Linux? Freedom. There's no license keys. There's no restrictive. There's no. You control your computer and you control which applications you install. Has many different distros for your system, and also what it should say is also different desktop environments as well. No bullshit Microsoft telemetry, so you got no reporting of data and then them sending it over to Microsoft, Microsoft spying on you, or if you have a webcam, them looking into your webcam. Hey, look, I see you're masturbating, young sir. Ignore that. Vast array of open source software for Linux, which if you do activate or use package managers, they have tons of open source software for you to use. Like 90% of the software on Linux is open source and you can use it. And can tinker everything with the OS. You want to change the desktop environment, do it. If you want to change the terminal, go ahead and do it. If you want to change your package manager, you can easily do that. Downsides: most DRM games aren't compatible with Proton, unless other things like Proton, which is basically like a compatibility layer, which allows you to play Windows-based games on Linux. All easy anti-cheat games aren't compatible with Proton. Well, probably because uh, all that other stuff, how difficult anti-cheat is to run. Many different distros, so many different distros to use, it becomes difficult to stick to one. So if you want to stick to like a like there's so many distros out there, it's very which results to distro hopping. It's so difficult to find a distribution that you want to stick with because there's so many. There's a lot of elite community vets. Only recently things have died down, but there's a lot of neckbeards like, oh, install Gentoo. Don't. If you're new to Linux, do not install Gentoo. You're gonna hate yourself. Or oh, you install Arch, or oh, you're an asshole if you don't use a window manager. Well, relax, dude. He's just a noob. Let him use what he wants to use. Major. Now we're gonna be talking about distributions. These are the major four. I mean, not four. The major few here that are actually what a lot of people base their distributions off of. So if you got some spins, you got Debian, Arch, Gentoo, Slackware, Fedora, and OpenSUSE. So the last two under there are actually independent, which means they're not based on Debian Arch at all. So Debian Arch, Gentoo, or Slackware, which it's kind of cool to see some. I did forget Solus up here, and I know there's a lot more that exist, like Solus and uh, Red Hat's other thing. But yep, that's it. Desktops. We'll be all about desktops. Next slide. So here are two desktops, LXQT and LXDE. So LXQT is a very light desktop. It looks kind of like the old Windows, and same thing with LXDE. There is differences between LXQT and LXDE, but how they look is practically the same. GNOME and Cinnamon. So Cinnamon, the reason why I put it here is because Cinnamon is actually based off of GNOME 3. So GNOME is what I run. I run Manjaro GNOME, and it pretty much looks like a touchscreen interface for tablets and stuff. It's quite nice. Cinnamon is a lot more familiar to Windows. It looks kind of similar to LXQT. It has a very easy user interface. And starting off, I would probably actually recommend newcomers to use Linux Mint, which is based off of Ubuntu, which Ubuntu is based off of Debian. A little confusing, but it's all right. Uh, Budgie and Mate. So Mate, this is actually Ubuntu Mate and what it ships off with. It looks very, very nice. Uh, Budgie, which is actually made by Solus, it's very customizable. You can customize a ton of things. The what they call Raven or these panels, you can pretty much go in depth with customizing it. Same with Mate, KDE, and Unity. So KDE is very customizable too, and also a lot of Windows users will actually feel welcomed using KDE. KDE is very light. It's also very powerful as well with uh, customizations and all that other stuff. Unity is actually the Ubuntu, what they used to use back in 1704, like the 1710. So around 17, I think 1804 is when they changed over to GNOME 3. So yeah, Unity. Just recently, there is a Ubuntu 2004 Unity remix that somebody has, and future video. So yeah, Ubuntu Unity. Someone's actually making a remix of modernizing the Ubuntu, like recreating the Ubuntu Unity back then that we had, but modernizing it and making it even better. These are two unique OSs, which Zorn is kind of okay. So Deepin is very, very interesting. Deepin, first view, Deepin looks amazing. It's based off of Debian, and right when you boot up the desktop, it looks absolutely gorgeous. You'd be like, ugh, you basically had a semi because of how amazing Debian looks, Deepin looks. You can change it to this, or you can actually change it to more of a Mac OS look to it. Zorn looks amazing too. It's based off of GNOME 3, so Zorn they kind of market it as their own thing, even though you can get some of the stuff on GNOME and just customize it. Any distro can play games. This is a huge, huge thing that a lot of these people market like, oh, my distro is a game only distro. Any distro can play games. You understand that? Any distribution can fucking play games. Like there isn't one distribution that's good for games. There isn't one distribution that's made for media enthusiasts. All it is basically they just ship it with like stuff, or they ship stuff. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's not very professional. They ship it with a lot of like packages and programs that are like meant for gamers, but they don't really like. Yes, there are some optimizations, but it's best just to use one of the bigger distros and modify it yourself so you understand the operating system a lot more. And like I just said, use as many big distros and modify them yourself. So, yep, my choice for you. So starting off, Ubuntu is probably your best option if you want to use Debian, because Debian's real easy to get into. But if you think Ubuntu is a bit choppy for you, because it tends to be that way. If you want a more stable Ubuntu, try Pop OS. Pop OS is based off of Ubuntu, and it's pretty good. It has a really good like customizable GNOME. It's very optimized. It has a lot of back-end things that actually improving Ubuntu. But if you're someone who wants the newer kernel, use Arch Linux and Manjaro. Now, Arch Linux, you do have to make and build up yourself. Like, you start from a command line and go from there. Same thing with Manjaro. Manjaro is basically an easier version of Arch, but you get the packages, the stable packages. You still get them early, yes, but you get the packages that are stable and tested. And I actually run Manjaro on my main machine. It's perfect, in my opinion. All major distributions have desktop environment flavors that you can install. For example, Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu but uses the LXQT desktop, and it's for low-end PCs. So if you want to use Ubuntu, if you have an old laptop, go for it. Ubuntu's pretty good. If you need help or advice, let me know in the comments. I'll respond to all comments, no matter what. Boss. So yeah, I'll respond to all comments, and I'll look over them, and I'll tell you which one's based off of you. Just tell me your system requirements, and I'll of course get a desktop for you to actually choose if you're starting off. And also, if you want to like run things in a virtual machine, that's fine. You can do that. You can also run it off of USB if you want to just try it out. You can make a USB that's where you can actually have an OS running on the USB, like if you want to run Tails or something like that. So, yep, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. The subscribe button's is down there. I'm also gonna have a description down there, explaining things too. And also, I also will link my Twitch down there too. Now I don't really stream that often on Twitch, but when I do, I'll probably just do playing some PS4 games, MW, or maybe some other game I think of. I might stream on PC some older titles, but if you guys enjoyed this, please let me know because I am. This was probably these projects are definitely going to be fun to make or be editing them and doing all this other stuff. So if you guys enjoyed, smash that like button, and peace.